Before we begin, take a moment to get comfortable. Maybe you're lying in bed, maybe you're studying, or maybe you're just here to unwind after a long day. Wherever you are, welcome. Tonight, we're exploring some of the most obscure and interesting Pokémon facts, the kind that don't show up in casual conversations or beginner guides. Strange trivia, forgotten beta designs, hidden data buried in old game code, and tiny details that even longtime fans may have missed. Some of these facts come from prototypes, some from the trading card game, some from anime production notes, and some from the earliest development stories behind the Pokemon world. So whether you're here for nostalgia, curiosity, or just something soft to listen to as you fall asleep, settle in, breathe, and let your mind wander back into the world of Pokemon, a place full of secrets, mysteries, and quiet details waiting to be rediscovered. If you enjoy videos like this, feel free to subscribe, not because you have to, but because you never know which overlooked piece of Pokemon history might surprise you next. Now, let's begin. Mew wasn't originally planned as part of the final Pokemon Red and Green release. After debugging was complete, programmer Shigeki Morimoto quietly added it into the game code using only about 300 leftover bytes of memory. It was never announced, tested, or documented, almost like a private joke among the developers. No one expected anyone outside the team to even know it existed. But that tiny decision would go on to shape one of the biggest mysteries in Pokemon history. Because Mew was added so late and kept hidden, there was no official way to get it during normal gameplay. That secrecy created decades of rumors, stories about impossible button sequences, hidden locations, or strange glitches that might reveal the mysterious Pokemon. Kids traded theories at lunch tables and playgrounds, convinced that someone, somewhere, had figured it out. Mew became more than just a creature. It became a myth. Hidden deep in Pokemon Red and Blue's code, Professor Oak actually has a complete battle setup, including a full team balanced at champion level strength. This means developers once considered giving players a final surprise challenge after beating the Elite Four and their rival. But for reasons never explained, the battle was cut. Oak remained a mentor instead of the strongest opponent in the game, leaving fans wondering what could have been. In the early 1997 Space World demo for Pokémon Gold and Silver, many familiar Pokémon looked completely different. Hoppip and its evolution line resembled playful cats with long tails rather than seeds floating on the wind. Wooper's early design was chunky and frog-like, nicknamed Mizuo. Looking back, these early prototypes show how dramatically Pokemon designs evolved before release. Maps from that same early demo show hints that developers originally planned a region shaped more like the entirety of Japan, not just Johto. Some areas aligned with real geography far outside the final map. It suggests Game Freak once imagined a much larger game, possibly connecting multiple regions from the start. Though that idea was scaled down, fans still love imagining what that version might have been. Ultra Beasts in Generation 7 aren't just strange in appearance, they're mathematically unusual. All of their base stats are prime numbers. Even many of their level up milestones follow prime number sequences. This subtle detail helps reinforce their identity as creatures from outside the known Pokemon ecosystem and otherworldly logic built directly into their stats. This prime number theme extends beyond Ultra Beasts to Pokemon like Cosmog, Cosmo-M, Solgaleo, Lunala, and many forms of Necrozma. Their stats and level patterns echo the same mathematical structure. It's a quiet way of connecting them to Ultra Beast lore, suggesting they might share origins or cosmic significance. Most players never notice, but once you know, it becomes an elegant detail hidden in the design. Vivillon is known for having 20 different wing patterns, but unlike most Pokemon forms, the pattern wasn't tied to where your character lived in the game. It depended on the real-world geographic location settings on your Nintendo 3DS. That meant the world itself shaped the Pokemon, making Vivillon one of the few species tied directly to player identity and place. Some Vivillon patterns are so geographically specific that they're nearly impossible to find without trading internationally. Certain patterns were tied to regions with very small populations of Pokemon players. This made completing a full Vivillon collection one of the hardest challenges in the entire series, not because of rarity, but because of geography, community, and patience. The 4 major islands of the Alola region in Pokemon Sun and Moon have names with hidden meaning. Melamela, Akala, Ula Ula, and Poni are Hawaiian words for colors: yellow, pink, red, and purple. Subtle color themes appear in their environments, characters, and even Pokemon found there. It's a quiet cultural detail that ties the region to its real-world inspiration. On each of Alola's islands, the meaning behind their names subtly connects to the 4 forms of Oricorio. Each island's associated color matches one of the special nectars that change Oricorio's form: yellow, pink, red, and purple. This wasn't just a coincidence. It's a layered design choice where language, geography, gameplay mechanics, and Pokemon biology quietly align. It's one of those details many players experience naturally without ever noticing how carefully everything was connected. The more you look at it, the more you realize how Alola wasn't just themed. It was woven together like a tapestry. In 2010, British artist James Turner became the first Westerner to officially design Pokemon. His works include creatures like Vanillite, Golurk, Buzzwole, and Guzzlord, each with a bold style that stands out. His designs often balance charm with a slightly surreal edge, giving them a distinct feel compared to earlier generations. Turner's involvement marked an important moment in Pokemon's history, showing the franchise was evolving beyond its exclusively Japanese creative roots and welcoming new artistic voices, while still staying true to the core design philosophy. Before officially joining Game Freak, James Turner worked with Genius Sonority and contributed to the GameCube era. His most famous work from that time is Shadow Lugia from Pokémon XD Gale of Darkness, a design that remains iconic in the fandom. He also directed animated cutscenes for the game. Seeing one artist's style subtly ripple through different parts of the franchise makes Pokémon feel like a living creative history where ideas travel, grow, and reappear in new forms. During early development of Generation 5, Game Freak mentioned several unused concepts, including the idea of a massive armored tank dragon and a tiny ant Pokemon planned to be the smallest in the entire Pokédex. While many concepts make it into the final games, others live only in development notes, sketches, and imagination. Sometimes, those unused ideas resurface years later as inspiration for new designs. Other times, they remain mysteries, hinting at how many unseen worlds exist behind the games we eventually play. Some of the Space World demo Pokémon from early Gold and Silver had drastically different appearances. Spinarak and Ariados had alternate designs, names, and body proportions. One version of Ariados even had a face-like marking on its abdomen, giving it a creepier tone. These prototypes reveal just how fluid Pokémon design can be, shifting, refining, and sometimes transforming completely before release. The final versions feel familiar today, but deep down, early builds remind us that the Pokémon we know could have looked very different. The early beta designs for Hoppip, Skiploom, and Jumpluff looked nothing like the soft, cottony Pokémon seen today. Instead, they resembled small, cat-like creatures with long tails, almost playful in personality. Over time, the concept shifted to a floating dandelion line carried by the wind, gentler and more whimsical. Seeing such extreme changes in evolution lines shows how flexible ideas can be before a final theme appears. IPOM's early prototype name was Teru, and its design leaned more toward a lemur than the playful monkey we recognize now. Its face was simpler, and the overall body shape was closer to real-world inspiration. As development continued, the design grew more expressive and exaggerated, eventually becoming the energetic, cartoonish IPOM, and later, Ambipom. Small evolutions in shape and personality can completely transform the tone of a design. Wooper's prototype from early development looked very different from the final version. Instead of the simple armless design we know, it walked on 4 legs and had a bulky, more amphibian-like body, closer to a salamander or tadpole evolving on land. Over time, the design was simplified, made cuter, and stylized. It's fascinating to see how Pokémon sometimes shift from realism to charm, and occasionally, the simplest idea becomes the most iconic. Many early maps from Gold and Silver reused tile sets from Kanto. Some areas looked like rearranged parts of older regions, suggesting Johto was slowly carved from early ideas, rather than immediately designed as a final map. Seeing these early iterations helps reveal how sequels grow organically, sometimes from familiar tools and familiar landscapes, before breaking into something entirely new. During early localization discussions, Nintendo of America reportedly suggested redesigning certain Pokémon, such as Pikachu and Charizard, to appear cooler or more Western. But Pokémon Company leadership insisted the designs stay authentic. They believed Pokémon's charm was universal, not something that needed to conform to another market. That decision helped preserve the unique personality and art direction that millions now recognize worldwide. Pallet Town, the quiet place where every Pokémon journey begins, wasn't chosen randomly. It's loosely inspired by the hometown of Pokémon's creator, Satoshi Tajiri. He grew up in Machida, Tokyo, an area that was once more rural, filled with fields, forests, and places where children could explore. That childhood environment heavily influenced Pokémon's early spirit of discovery. Starting the player in a peaceful, simple town wasn't just a game design choice. It was a personal reflection of where the idea of Pokémon was born. The Kalos region, introduced in Generation 6, has the largest in-game population of any Pokémon region. Meanwhile, Kanto remains one of the smallest and quietest. This difference reflects the growth of the franchise. As technology advanced and world building became richer, regions became more populated, diverse and lively. Kalos, inspired by France, feels bustling and modern, full of trainers, cafes, shops, and stories. Kanto feels rural and simple, frozen in time as a snapshot of the series' beginning. All of the original 151 Pokémon were designed by a remarkably small team. Ken Sugimori acted as the lead artist, and nearly every official piece of artwork from the early generations was finalized by his hand. Those designs helped define the visual language of Pokémon: simple shapes, clear silhouettes, and memorable personalities. Even today, modern Pokémon still reflect Sugimori's influence. Throughout development, Game Freak intentionally removed or refined many monster designs, even after fully drawing and naming them. They wanted the Pokédex to feel balanced and meaningful, not cluttered or directionless. This creative restraint helped make each Pokémon feel distinct, with its own identity and place in the world. Pikachu wasn't always destined to be the face of Pokémon. In early ideas, Clefairy was considered for the mascot role, but once the anime aired, Pikachu's energetic personality and adorable voice helped launch it into iconic status. Merchandise sales quickly confirmed the world-loved Pikachu. The franchise had found its symbol. Hidden deep in Pokémon Red and Blue's code, there's an unused full battle against Professor Oak. His team includes Tauros, Exeggutor, Arcanine, Gyarados, and whichever starter you didn't choose. This reinforces the idea that Oak may have once been intended as a final test, one last challenge after defeating the champion. But instead, he remained a guide, not a rival. One of the most famous playground myths claimed you could find Mew under a truck near the SS Anne. No button sequence or hidden mechanic ever triggered it, but the rumor lived for years. The real glitch that allowed players to find Mew was so strange and specific that the myth felt almost believable. In some early promotional material, Kanto was called Kanto Province. This phrasing hinted that Pokémon regions may have once been imagined as part of a larger country, similar to real-world Japan. Over time, the world expanded, becoming more ambiguous and fantastical rather than geographically literal. Ultra Beasts from Generation 7 not only look different, they sound different. Many of their cries have metallic, artificial tones or distorted effects. Their audio helps reinforce the idea that they are outsiders, things that don't quite belong in the natural Pokémon world. Alolan Exeggutor became famous for its extra long neck, but this wasn't a random joke. An early Pokédex entry decades earlier mentioned that Exeggutor would grow taller in tropical climates. The Alolan version fulfilled that old detail in a playful and surprising way, proof that sometimes Pokémon lore takes time to bloom. Cosmog and its evolution line are often grouped with legendary Pokémon, but in some in-universe material, they're actually classified closer to Ultra Beasts. This subtle detail helps explain why their base stats follow the same prime number pattern used for Ultra Beasts in Generation 7. The idea suggests that Cosmog isn't just a rare Pokémon. It's something that sits at the edge of the Pokémon world, connected to strange cosmic forces. Whether intentional storytelling or a fun design coincidence, it adds a quiet layer of mystery to a Pokémon line already known for being unusual, ethereal, and not fully understood, even by characters in the games. Before the Steel type became official in Generation 2, some early Japanese notes referred to it simply as the Metal type. Prototype discussions also referenced a flying metallic creature, something like an armored bird. Fans later connected this concept to Skarmory, whose final design closely matches those early descriptions. The change from metal to steel was small, but it helped the typing feel clean, thematic, and distinct from normal metal objects. Over time, steel became one of the iconic defensive typings in Pokémon, but it began as a simple placeholder name and a sketch of a bird made of armor. The Pokewalker included with Heart Gold and Soul Silver wasn't just a step counter. It held secret content, mini areas, hidden encounters, and even exclusive moves that couldn't be found anywhere else. You could catch Pokémon like Flying Pikachu or special forms that normally required events. Players who used it regularly often felt like the real world, and the Pokémon world were connected in a quiet, playful way. In a sense, the Pokewalker was an early predecessor to Pokémon Go, encouraging movement, curiosity, and exploration outside the screen. In Pokémon X and Y, a side story involving the Detective Looker quietly hints at a global police system operating behind the scenes in the Pokémon world. It suggests that each region isn't isolated, but part of a larger international network involved in maintaining order, responding to threats, and investigating criminal groups. The story isn't emphasized loudly. It appears quietly, almost like a secret, but it expands the world in a subtle and believable way, showing that the world of Pokémon is much bigger than just one region at a time. Pokémon Stadium, Colosseum, and other early 3D battle games featured unique attack animations that never returned in later titles. Moves like Hyper Beam, Thunderbolt, or Flamethrower sometimes had dramatic visual effects that made them feel powerful and cinematic. Fans often remember these early animations fondly because they weren't just functional, they felt like a performance. These games showed what Pokémon battles could look like in full spectacle, long before the main series switched to 3D or Missing No, and other glitch Pokémon in Generation 1 didn't come from intentional programming. They existed because Pokémon data was rearranged late in development, leaving unused index numbers with strange partial data. When the game tried to interpret those empty slots, it produced glitch sprites, weird behaviors, and unforgettable oddities. That chaotic glitchiness became part of Pokémon folklore, proof that even unfinished data can spark legends. The Japanese versions of Red and Green contained different sprites and trainer artwork than later international releases. Some designs were more detailed, while others had more exaggerated or unusual proportions. When Pokémon was prepared for release outside Japan, some sprites were cleaned up or redesigned entirely. These early visual differences feel like alternate timelines, a look at how Pokémon could have appeared if localization choices had gone differently. The Ultra Beast's cries in Generation 7 were intentionally unsettling. Sound designers added mechanical distortion, uneven timing, or glitch-like qualities to make them feel unnatural. It gives the impression that these creatures don't quite follow the same biological rules as normal Pokémon, that they are visitors, anomalies, or invaders from another plane of existence. Their cries help tell that story without any dialogue. Vivillon has many wing patterns, but one, called the Fancy Pattern, was only distributed after the Pokémon community achieved 100 million trades on the global trade system. That meant the pattern wasn't just rare, It was tied directly to real-world player collaboration. It stands as a reminder that sometimes Pokémon designs reflect not just the world inside the game, but the players shaping it from outside. In Heart Gold and Soul Silver, when Pokémon walk behind the player, each species uses a slightly different movement script. Some Pokémon move slowly, some bounce, and some struggle to keep up, creating a subtle sense of personality. This tiny detail makes the world feel warmer and more alive, like every Pokémon truly has its own way of being and moving through the world. The four main islands of Alola aren't just named after Hawaiian colors, they also loosely map onto real Hawaiian island geography. Melameli resembles Oahu, Akala aligns with Maui, Ulaula parallels Kauai, and Pony reflects the Big Island. This regional mapping wasn't loudly advertised, but it quietly reinforces how grounded Alola is in real-world culture and landscape. The idea wasn't simply to make a tropical region, it was to create a Pokémon world shaped by the same volcanic geography, cultural rhythm, and layered symbolism found in Hawaii. Even the island trials reflect Hawaii's tradition of rites of passage and community mentorship. Alola isn't just a setting, it's a subtle homage to place, history, and lived environment. Many Pokémon cries in the early Game Boy games weren't individually recorded sounds, but edits of a small shared sound library. Developers changed pitch, length, and distortion effects to create something new. Because of this system, some Pokémon share nearly identical cries with only slight adjustments, such as pitch shifts or shortened tones. These limitations came from cartridge space, but the result became iconic. The beeps and distortions of early Pokémon games still feel nostalgic decades later, even though modern Pokémon now have more complex, realistic, or atmospheric cries. The early sound limitations accidentally built an unforgettable audio identity. In Generation 1, a glitch known as the Cool Trainer Move Glitch could cause trainers to send out corrupted Pokémon, sometimes at impossibly high levels like 200 or 255. These glitch Pokémon behaved similarly to Missing No, with distorted sprites, strange movesets, and unpredictable battle effects. Some even copied data from unrelated memory areas, causing strange names or repeating characters. Like most Generation 1 glitches, it wasn't intentional, but it became part of the mythos of early Pokémon. Something unpredictable, mysterious, and whispered between players before the age of official patch notes and online databases. The move splash is widely misunderstood because its name is a mistranslation. In Japanese, the move is called hop, referencing a small bouncing movement, not water. When Magikarp got the move, the meaning still made sense because it flails around helplessly. But when the game was translated into English, hop became splash, which created confusion later when non-water Pokémon like Hoppip or Spoink also learned it. Even after the mistake was recognized, it was never changed, because at that point, the mistranslation had already become part of Pokémon history. Concept art from early development shows several Pokémon ideas that eventually evolved into familiar species years later. Some sketches included a two-headed spider, a plated turtle resembling Tortuga, and an early spinning top fighter that resembles Hitmontop. These prototypes reveal that Pokémon design isn't always instant. It can take years, sometimes even generations, for a design idea to find the right context, art style, or mechanical role. Some early concepts were discarded, others resurfaced in new ways, and a few became entirely different Pokémon than originally planned. Some NPC dialogue in the Unova games refers to Pokémon originating in South America. This subtle line mirrors early Gen 1 lore referencing real world continents. Since Unova was based on New York instead of Japan, the writing team used more global references, implying that the Pokemon world and Earth may share parallels or overlapping geography. This detail has fueled fan theories for years, suggesting future regions could explore more culturally diverse or previously referenced locations, all hinted at long before they ever appeared in game. Alola remains one of the most culturally intentional Pokemon regions. Its language, place names, traditions, and even NPC greetings include real Hawaiian language elements. Pokemon designs like Oricorio, Tapu species, and regional forms reflect Polynesian ecology and symbolism. Even the laid back pacing and emphasis on community mirrors Hawaiian values. Rather than simply using tropical scenery, the region integrates culture into mechanics, storytelling, and identity, making Alola feel genuinely lived in, not just themed. Sometimes Pokemon are designed the opposite way many people assume. Instead of starting with a creature concept and building gameplay around it, Game Freak has explained that some species begin as mechanical placeholders, like early bird, late dragon, or starter mammal. Once the gameplay role is set, artists and lore writers shape the personality, appearance, typing, and world context around that gameplay function. This explains recurring Pokemon archetypes each generation, similar roles, new designs. In nearly every Pokemon game, the internal ordering of Pokemon data differs slightly from the final National Dex order. These internal lists reveal late development decisions, such as inserting Pokemon, renaming files, or shifting evolutions. Sometimes a Pokemon meant to evolve into another was changed or separated late into development. These subtle data traces act like a fossil record in game code, showing how the Pokédex evolved behind the scenes. Many legendary Pokémon share stat patterns like totals of 600, 680, or 700. Ultra Beasts, however, standardize at 570, marking them as powerful but not legendary. This numerical boundary helps quietly define Ultra Beasts as something outside normal categories, not divine beings, but strange entities. Their stats reinforce their identity, unsettling, structured, and mathematically distinct. Mew's original concept wasn't just a hidden Pokemon, it was deliberately created to spark mystery. Satoshi Tajiri was inspired by games like Xevious, where players believed there were hidden secrets nobody had officially confirmed. Tajiri wanted to recreate that feeling, the quiet possibility that something rare was out there, waiting for curious players to discover it. So Mew wasn't just coded in late. It was intentionally hidden with no official mention, no in-game hints, and no intended method to obtain it. In a way, Mew wasn't just a Pokemon. It was a story seed, a rumor made real, designed to live through conversations, playground whispers, and the imagination of players rather than menus or dialogue boxes. The Space World 1997 demo contained around 100 new Pokemon, a raw early version of what eventually became the Johto Pokédex. Many of these designs later changed dramatically, while others vanished entirely and never returned. Some were early prototypes of familiar Pokemon like Girafarig, Houndoom, and Scizor, while others were strange, whimsical, or experimental. The demo gives a rare glimpse into Pokémon before the final polishing stage, when ideas were still fluids, evolving, merging, or being discarded. For fans today, this demo serves almost like an archaeological site, a preserved snapshot of Pokemon development history, revealing how many designs were reshaped on the way to release. Some Alolan town names carry multiple layers of meaning, including emotional terms woven into Hawaiian language roots. For example, Hauoli means happy, matching the town's bright, cheerful atmosphere and early game tone. The naming design in Alola wasn't random. It carried cultural intention, respecting real linguistic structures, while also reinforcing the personality of each location. Instead of simply naming towns after colors, trees, or themes, Alola uses language itself as world building. These subtle design choices help root the region in something more grounded and meaningful, creating a sense of authenticity that players may not consciously notice, but still feel. Spinda has a surprisingly intentional detail hidden in its stats, a total base stat sum of 360. Some fans associate that number with a perfect circle, a full spin, which mirrors Spinda's dizzy, stumbling personality and spiral-themed design. Combined with its nearly infinite possible spot patterns, no two Spinda look the same, and this randomness gives the Pokemon a playful unpredictability. Even though Spinda doesn't stand out as a competitive powerhouse, it remains one of the most mathematically interesting Pokemon in the series, a creature defined not by strength, but by its uniqueness. In Generation 1, the move Focus Energy was supposed to increase critical hit rate, but due to a programming bug, it did the opposite and significantly lowered it. Because crits in Genesis 1 were based on a Pokemon's speed stat, fast Pokemon still landed frequent critical hits, but Focus Energy made the mechanic feel inconsistent and confusing. This bug remained part of the game's identity, and some players grew up thinking Focus Energy simply did nothing or was a flavor move. In later generations, the move finally worked as intended, but its glitchy history remains part of Pokemon's early mechanical quirks. Pokemon Black and White hold a unique distinction. During the main story, every wild Pokemon encounter is a brand new species. That means, until the credits roll, players experience a Pokédex composed entirely of Unova Pokemon. No Pikachu, no Zubat, no legacy species returning until post-game. The decision was bold and intentional. Game Freak wanted the Unova region to feel like a fresh start, almost like the world players experienced in 1996. This design choice makes Generation 5 stand out as both nostalgic and experimental, a rare moment where Pokemon rebooted itself without truly restarting. The very first battle, seen in the Pokemon anime's opening, Nidorino vs. Gengar, wasn't random. It was a direct reference to the unused battle sequence programmed into the title screen of Pokemon Red and Green. Many players never saw the full animation because it didn't appear in normal gameplay, but the anime chose to use it as a bridge between game and show. That single shot quietly told players, this is the same world, just seen from a new angle. Ken Sugimori's early art books reveal that many Pokemon started as incredibly simple shapes, circles, blobs, and loose doodles, before being refined through multiple iterations. The final versions we know today were often shaped over many passes, adjusting proportions, silhouettes, poses, and expressions to create something balanced, recognizable, and timeless. This slow, thoughtful process helped form Pokemon's visual identity, simple enough to draw from memory, but distinct enough to feel alive. Kalos was the first region in the main series to clearly draw influence from a language outside Japanese. Signs, menus, place names, and even minor dialogue fragments reflect French vocabulary and style. This approach made the region feel worldly, elegant, expressive, and distinct, marking a transition toward more globally inspired region design. Facilities like the Battle Frontier may feel uniquely difficult, but behind the scenes, many NPC teams are built from modified versions of standard AI scripts. Developers then stack additional rules like optimal move choice, prediction, or item synergy, creating AI that feels unexpectedly strategic, even punishing. The subtle adjustments made Battle Frontier matches feel unlike regular gameplay, more like real competition. The red Gyarados at the Lake of Rage was the first intentionally scripted shiny encounter in the series. Game Freak added it because shiny Pokemon were so rare in Generation 2 that many players might never encounter one naturally. By ensuring everyone could meet one during the story, players would learn that alternate colored Pokemon existed, even if they didn't yet understand their rarity, mechanics, or long-term value. The red Gyarados also tied naturally into the plot, symbolizing Team Rocket's forced evolution experiments and giving players a reason to remember the moment. For many players, this encounter became the emotional anchor point for shiny discovery, the first time a Pokemon looked different enough to feel mysterious. In Pokemon X and Y, if you wander into a narrow alley in Lumio City, something unusual happens. A ghostly girl silently appears behind the player. She floats rather than walking, says a single cryptic line, "No, you're not the one," and then fades out of existence. There's no follow-up event, no quest, and no official explanation. She never battles, never appears again, and never acknowledges the encounter. The lack of closure makes this moment one of the eeriest events in the mainline games, something subtle and haunting in a world usually defined by cheerful adventure. That same Lumio's ghost girl has never been explained in any official guide, game, book, anime, or manga. Unlike mysteries such as the Unknown or Giratina's lore, which were later clarified, this ghost remains intentionally unresolved. Some fans theorize she's a lost soul tied to a cut feature, while others think she hints at a larger supernatural element in the Pokemon world. Over a decade later, she still remains one of the most quietly unsettling pieces of Pokemon storytelling, a ghost not meant to scare, but to linger in memory. The Pokéradar introduced in Diamond, Pearl, and Platinum uses a hidden chaining mechanic that increases shiny odds with each successful sequential encounter. After a certain chain length, your odds become dramatically better, but breaking the chain resets everything. Because chaining requires attention, strategy, and patience, losing a chain right before the shiny threshold can feel devastating. Players describe the process as equal parts meditation and frustration, a calm pattern of grass patch selection that can be destroyed instantly by forgetting one small detail. When it works, the reward is a shiny earned through intention rather than luck. In the Mystery Dungeon series, Pokemon speak with full dialogue, revealing personalities, insecurities, humor, and fears that never appear in the main games. Pokémon worry, brag, joke, and form friendships. Even species known for being fierce or stoic gain emotional nuance. The writing often explores themes of belonging, purpose, and identity, treating Pokémon as characters rather than tools or teammates. For many fans, Mystery Dungeon offers a different perspective, not just battling with Pokémon, but living alongside them. The Pokémon Ranger series introduced a very different mechanic. Instead of catching and keeping Pokémon, you formed temporary partnerships by drawing loops on the touchscreen. The idea was to represent helping Pokémon rather than owning them, making the relationship feel cooperative instead of controlling. After assisting the player, Pokémon calmly return to nature. This mechanic emphasized empathy and connection, a refreshing interpretation of the Pokémon universe. The Pokéathlon in Heart Gold and Soul Silver secretly uses its own stat system separate from normal battle stats. This means Pokémon that are slow or fragile in combat can unexpectedly excel in certain athletic events. A surprising Pokémon may dominate races, strength events, or technical challenges simply because of its hidden Pokéathlon values. Players who explore the mode deeply often discover unlikely champions, turning overlooked species into stars. Because Ash's Butterfree was released in the anime as part of a heartfelt goodbye episode, a widespread rumor formed claiming that releasing your own Butterfree in the games would trigger something special. Some said another Butterfree would return later. Others said it would unlock events or secret dialogue. In reality, nothing happens. But the rumor persisted because the emotional weight of that moment in the anime made it feel like it should matter everywhere. The infamous Lavender Town creepypasta, the story claiming the original music harmed players, is entirely fictional. Yet the rumor spread because the Lavender Town theme sounds unusually unsettling compared to other tracks. The music's eerie tone, combined with a town centered around loss and memorials, created a rare moment in Pokémon. Quiet discomfort rather than adventure. Even without the myth, the track remains one of the most atmospheric and haunting in gaming. Early Western marketing nearly presented Pokémon as more aggressive and edgy, with sharper slogans, darker packaging, and a more competitive tone. The Pokémon Company pushed back, insisting the franchise remain friendly, imaginative, and welcoming. That decision helped shape Pokémon's long-term identity, a world of curiosity and comfort rather than intensity. A noticeable portion of the Galar Pokédex consists of Pokémon originally introduced in Unova. At first glance, it feels random, but it quietly reflects a long-standing pattern in Pokémon world building. Older regions influence the ecosystems of newer ones. Instead of treating regions as isolated worlds, Game Freak often reintroduces species that logically could have migrated, been imported, or settled through human travel or environmental connections. The result is a living biological web rather than a series of disconnected Pokédex lists. Galar and Unova also share thematic ties. Both are inspired by real-world Western regions rather than Japan. That subtle link makes their shared species feel natural, like an unspoken continuity rather than coincidence. Developers have stated that when designing a new region, they start by imagining the geography, climate, culture, ecosystems, and natural resources. Only after establishing the world do they decide which returning Pokémon belong there. This avoids the feeling of a random greatest hits selection. For example, desert regions logically include Pokémon that thrive in dry habitats, while icy regions bring back Arctic species. This ecological approach makes the Pokémon world feel believable, as if each region evolved naturally rather than being curated from a menu. Legendary trios, like the birds, beasts, swords of justice, or titans, often share mirrored stat spreads. One may be fast and fragile, another bulky and slow, and the third somewhere balanced between. The similarity reinforces them as a connected set rather than standalone legendaries. Their patterns suggest shared origins, shared destinies, and shared lore, even when the games don't explicitly explain the relationship. When Pokemon Go launched in 2016, its impact wasn't just digital, it changed physical communities. Cities reported increases in daily step counts, park usage, and foot traffic in areas that had previously been quiet. Museums, public gardens, and waterfronts became gathering spots for players who might never otherwise visit them. For a brief moment, Pokemon blurred the line between game spaces and public spaces, turning cities into living maps. Vivillon's regional pattern feature expanded further through Pokemon Go and later connectivity. Completing all patterns became less about grinding and more about community, trading with international players, traveling, or making friends in faraway places. In that way, Vivillon became a real-world collection challenge, tied not to luck, but to experience and connection. Some maps, especially Unova's, include faint silhouettes of neighboring continents or islands that have never appeared in any official game. These hints suggest that the Pokemon world is much larger than the playable regions, full of places yet unseen. Whether lore teases, scrapped plans, or world building flourishes, these blank map spaces spark imagination. There are still regions unknown. Many early Pokemon cries were engineered to conserve memory. Instead of recording entirely new sounds, Game Freak manipulated a small library of base waveforms, reversing them, changing pitch, or stretching them into new shapes. Some Pokemon share cries that are nearly identical except for subtle speed or tone differences. These limitations shaped the iconic glitchy chiptune soundscape of early Pokemon, minimal but unforgettable. Kanto's city names follow a color system: cerulean, blue, vermilion, red-orange, lavender, purple, saffron, yellow, and so on. Decades later, fans noticed that Alola's islands follow a similar pattern, but rooted in Hawaiian language instead of English color names. This parallel shows how themes repeat across generations, but evolve culturally. Some early Gen 1 move descriptions in prototype English translations were far rougher than the polished text fans eventually saw. Names were simplified, rephrased, or rewritten to maintain tone consistency. Localization wasn't just translation, it was a careful shaping of Pokemon's voice. Satoshi Tajiri once explained that trading wasn't meant to feel like copying data, but like physically sending a living creature through a wire to someone else. That emotional framing became a defining part of Pokemon's identity. Trading wasn't a feature, it was connection. Game Freak's UX team has mentioned that the layout of the Pokédex, from scrolling direction to button spacing, was carefully tested so that even very young players could navigate it without instructions. The Pokédex isn't designed like a technical manual, but like a toy, intuitive, accessible, and inviting. By flipping through entries, kids naturally learn sorting, categorization, and curiosity driven exploration. This design philosophy reflects Pokemon's core identity, a world meant to be discovered, not explained. So even though the Pokédex looks simple, its interface design is intentional. It quietly teaches players how to interact with information, making the act of browsing the Pokédex feel like a small adventure of its own. In Pokemon X and Y, NPC roller skaters glide through Lumio City using a separate movement system from walking NPCs. Their motion doesn't just look different, the animation logic follows a circular, momentum based path rather than grid based steps. The result is subtle. When you watch them skate, the movement feels fluid, looping, and alive. It adds personality to the city without needing dialogue or cutscenes. Lumios is large, fashionable, and energetic, and the skating NPCs reinforce that tone through animation alone. Many players never consciously noticed the difference, yet they still felt it, because movement communicates culture just as much as architecture or music. Shadow Lugia, the dark, corrupted form from Pokemon XD, Gale of Darkness, is one of the rare Pokemon designs created by a Western artist, James Turner. What makes it especially notable is that the design later crossed into other forms of Pokemon media, including the anime and official artwork. Usually, design direction moves from the core Japanese development team outward, but in this case, influence traveled the other way. Shadow Lugia stands as a rare example of how Pokemon's global creative relationship allows ideas to move across media and cultures, not just from Japan outward, but sometimes from the outside back into the core. The Pokemon World Tournament in Black 2 and White 2 quietly acts like a playable history book. By reusing and adjusting the rosters of former champions and gym leaders, it creates a condensed history of Pokemon battling across generations. Instead of reading lore or watching cutscenes, players experience history through strategy, facing familiar names, iconic teams, and nostalgic movesets reimagined under new rules. No narrator explains the connections, yet longtime players recognize the shift from era to era, almost like revisiting chapters of a story through combat rather than text. Some Pokeballs, like the Dusk Ball, Timer Ball, and Repeat Ball, actually outperform Ultra Balls in certain conditions. The games rarely point this out directly, which means many players learn these advantages through experimentation or community discussion. It creates a quiet layer of mastery. The more deeply someone engages with the system, the more efficient and resourceful they become. These Pokeballs reward knowledge rather than raw power, a design choice that gently encourages players to pay attention to time, behavior, and environment. The Beast Ball is a prime example of contextual design. When used on regular Pokemon, its catch rate is frustratingly low, making it feel impractical or gimmicky. But in Ultra Beast encounters, its effectiveness skyrockets. This mechanic mirrors the world building. The Beast Ball wasn't meant for domestic wildlife. It was invented for extra-dimensional creatures. Instead of telling the player this through dialogue, the game demonstrates it through function. The Beast Ball quietly reinforces its own backstory, which makes it one of the most lore-aligned items in the series. Unlike most legendary Pokemon, which are treated as unique individuals or divine beings, Ultra Beasts appear to exist as biological species. In some canon sources, they are implied to live in groups or populations within their own dimensions. This difference blurs the line between legendary and unknown ecology. Ultra beasts feel powerful and mysterious, not because they are singular, but because they belong to ecosystems we cannot fully understand. Their existence suggests that the Pokémon world, and worlds beyond it, are much larger and stranger than traditional myths imply. Some early glitches in Generation 1 can produce invisible ghost trainers, which freeze the game when defeated. These trainers aren't scripted encounters or secret bosses, they're artifacts of memory overflow and scrambled pointer data. Because the sprite fails to load properly, the trainer appears invisible, with only a battle trigger remaining. To a child discovering this glitch by accident, it might feel supernatural, a ghostly opponent who should not exist. It's another example of how early coding limitations unintentionally contributed to Pokemon's haunted folklore. In Sword and Shield, the wild area doesn't generate Pokemon randomly. Instead, the game schedules weather patterns daily based on the system clock. Because many species are tied to specific weather conditions, like fog, snow, or storms, the wild area becomes a natural calendar of shifting ecosystems. Players might not even realize they are following a schedule. They simply notice that certain Pokemon feel seasonal or rare. This mechanic makes the world feel alive, changing subtly over time, even when players aren't aware of the underlying system. Pokémon X and Y marked a major milestone, the first mainline Pokémon games released simultaneously worldwide. For the first time, players around the globe began their adventure together, discovering new Pokémon, trading, and forming theories at the exact same moment. That unified release transformed Pokémon from a staggered regional experience into a shared global event, a moment where the entire community stepped into the unknown together. To create Alola, the development team didn't just design a tropical map. They consulted real aspects of Hawaiian culture, geography, and worldview. They studied language structure, naming conventions, architecture, and the natural landscapes of the islands. But Alola isn't a direct copy of Hawaii. It's a respectful interpretation. Some features were adjusted for gameplay pacing, travel routes, and narrative flow. The result is a region that feels warm, personal, and culturally grounded, while still remaining unmistakably Pokemon. Rather than just borrowing aesthetics, Alola incorporates values like community, respect for nature, and tradition, making the region feel lived in rather than simply themed. In Scarlet and Violet, the academy at the center of Paldea is more than just a story location. It's meant to evoke European universities and the culture surrounding them. Instead of a linear adventure where players collect badges in a strict order, the structure mirrors university life, exploration, personal growth, elective paths, and choosing challenges at your own pace. The Gym Challenge, the Team Star storyline, and the Titan quests all reflect different fields of study, encouraging curiosity rather than obligation. The Academy becomes a symbolic home base, stable, scholarly, and full of possibility, while the world beyond remains open and unpredictable. Terastallization introduced a new twist to battle identity. A Pokemon can change into a completely different typing during combat. A seemingly fragile Pokemon can suddenly gain resistances or surprise offensive potential. A flying Pikachu might become water type. A fire type could turn grass or fairy. This mechanic encourages prediction, risk-taking, and creativity, challenging assumptions about what a Pokémon should be. Unlike Mega Evolutions or Dynamax, which visibly transform Pokémon, terastallization alters the invisible logic behind strategy, creating a quiet tension between appearance and reality. The Ultra Beast's prime number theme goes deeper than just their base stats. In Generation 7, even the levels at which they learn moves adhere to prime numbers 7, 11, 17, 23, and so on, with only a few exceptions, like Naganadel's speed adjustment. This pattern reinforces the idea that Ultra Beasts are not part of the same natural order as typical Pokémon. They are mathematical anomalies, biologically coherent, yet constructed around patterns unfamiliar to the Pokémon ecosystem. When Ultra Beasts returned in Sword and Shield, their carefully structured level-up patterns were no longer strictly tied to prime numbers. To most players, this change went unnoticed, but to those who caught the pattern in Generation 7, it marked a quiet shift. The Ultra Beasts remained mechanically distinct, but their mathematical mystery softened. It's a small example of how lore can subtly evolve, sometimes perfectly preserved, and sometimes gently reshaped by newer systems. Some of the most famous Pokémon creepypastas, such as the idea of a ghostly Marowak appearing in unusual places, stem from the fact that Lavender Town already contained somber themes. Its music, tower setting, and storyline about loss created an emotional tone rarely seen in early children's RPGs. Because the tone stood apart from the rest of the game, players filled in the silence with imagination, and over time, fan stories blurred with memory, creating ghost stories that feel almost plausible. Before online trading existed, Pokémon centers served as physical hubs for link cable communication. When players gathered with Game Boy systems, the Cable Club became a social space, not just a menu option. The Pokémon Center layout still reflects that function today. The counter placement, the central terminal, the subtle implication that Pokémon and people connect face to face. Even though technology evolved, the architecture remained, preserving memory and design. One episode of the Pokémon anime featuring Porygon was banned after flashing screen effects caused seizures in some viewers in Japan. Although Pikachu, not Porygon, triggered the effect, Porygon became quietly avoided in future anime appearances. As a result, Porygon remains one of the most notable Pokémon, with extensive game presence, but almost no screen representation, a silent artifact of an unintended event that shaped the franchise's broadcast policies. Internal data from Generation 1 games shows that Raiden was among the earliest Pokémon implemented into the game engine, despite sitting at Pokédex number 112. This strongly suggests that the order Pokémon appear in the Pokédex is curated rather than developmental. The internal ordering provides a fossil record of how early game structures formed, hinting which Pokémon served as technical prototypes and engine tests. Several battle animations from Pokémon Stadium and Colosseum influenced visual effects in later mainline titles. These spin-off games functioned as experimental animation testbeds, providing room to explore style, timing, and spectacle before those ideas appeared in handheld entries. In this way, the spin-offs quietly shaped the future aesthetic direction of the series, not through dialogue or lore, but through visual motion. Some official Pokemon TCG artwork quietly references in-game lore or locations without directly stating it. In certain cards, you might see Pokemon together in areas where they would never naturally meet in the games. A Lucario on Mount, Coronet alongside a Johto Pokemon, or a Hoenn species training in Galar's ruins. These illustrations hint at journeys that players never explicitly witness, untold stories between regions, friendships formed during travel, and trainers moving Pokemon across the world. In a way, the TCG becomes a silent extension of the world building, filling the gaps between generations through imagery rather than dialogue. For fans who pay attention, the cards can feel like postcards from unseen adventures. If you listen closely to Ultra Beast cries across Sun and Moon, Ultra Sun and Moon, and later appearances, they share a metallic tone, something radio-like, distorted, and slightly artificial. These effects were intentionally chosen to make them sound wrong, as if they belong to a reality not fully aligned with the Pokemon world. The distortion isn't loud or dramatic. It's subtle enough that many players only notice subconsciously. This sound design choice reinforces the idea that Ultra Beasts aren't mythical guardians or natural wildlife. They're visitors, anomalies, or intrusions from somewhere unfamiliar. Alolan Exegutor's exaggeratedly tall neck, which at first seemed like a joke design, actually matches early concept art drawn by Ken Sugimori decades earlier. The original idea for Exegutor was closer to a towering palm tree, tall, unwieldy, and slightly whimsical. But due to sprite limitations in early games, the design had to be compressed, losing its full scale. The Alolan form restored that original vision, turning a long-running joke about a stubby palm tree into a full-circle homage to its earliest artistic idea. Game Freak has openly acknowledged that not every mystery in Pokémon is meant to be solved. Unexplained ghosts, strange NPCs, abandoned buildings, and cryptic references exist partly to recreate the rumor culture that surrounded the original games in the 1990s, a time without data mining, guides, or instant answers. By leaving gaps, they allow players to imagine, speculate, and tell stories. These unanswered pieces act as living folklore, evolving with each generation. When Pokémon Go launched in 2016, excitement was so overwhelming that servers struggled almost immediately. Niantic had to pause international rollout schedules to avoid complete collapse. People around the world waited days or weeks for their region's release, but the anticipation only fueled the cultural wave. For a short time, the world felt connected by one shared curiosity, stepping outside to see which Pokémon existed just beyond one's doorstep. Pikachu's voice in early games was simply a short, synthesized chirp, an electronic beep shaped into personality. Later, starting with Pokémon Let's Go, Pikachu began using Ikue Otani's voice clips from the anime. This shift blurred the line between the game continuity and the television world, transforming Pikachu from a silent sprite companion into a character many players recognized through sound alone. Ash Ketchum's journey in the anime spanned decades before finally concluding, but the games never confirm his existence. This separation allows every player to imagine themselves as the protagonist of their own Pokémon story without being overshadowed by a canonical figure. Ash exists as a cultural icon, but not as a fixed part of the main game universe, preserving the feeling that your adventure is the defining one. Pokemon creator Satoshi Tajiri's childhood fascination with catching insects shaped the emotional core of the franchise. He once described the joy of finding a rare beetle or gently collecting creatures in nature, experiences that inspired the mechanics of exploration, capturing, and curiosity. For Tajiri, Pokemon wasn't just a game, it was a way to preserve and share the feeling of discovery he cherished as a child. Because Mew was secretly inserted into the game code late in development, it was never fully tested. Its interactions with certain mechanics, memory indexes, and glitch behaviors are partly why Generation 1 is filled with unusual quirks, loopholes, and odd behaviors surrounding Mew. Its existence wasn't just mysterious in story, it was literally a hidden element of the game's code. Many fans call the Pokémon from the Space World 1997 prototype Generation 1.5 because so many designs feel halfway between Kanto and Johto. Some later evolved into official Johto Pokémon, while others disappeared completely, leaving behind only grainy screenshots and speculation. The prototype remains one of the most fascinating glimpses into how Pokemon design evolves, not in straight lines, but through experimentation, revision, and sometimes loss. In Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon, Ultra Space is no longer just a single surreal location. It becomes a network of distinct worlds, each visually tailored to match the Ultra Beast that inhabits it. Instead of implying one shared origin, the game reveals that these creatures come from separate ecosystems with their own environments, climates, and visual identities. This shift reframes Ultra Beasts not as invaders from one alternate universe, but as life forms from a vast multiverse of strange, layered realities. The result feels bigger, stranger, and more mysterious, a quiet expansion of Pokemon's cosmology. James Turner, originally known for designing Pokemon like Vanillite and Shadow Lugia, eventually became the art director for Pokemon Sword and Shield. That made him the first Westerner to influence the visual identity of an entire mainline Pokemon generation. His style blends bold, playful shapes with clean silhouettes, a design philosophy visible in many Galar Pokemon. It's a rare example of Pokemon's artistic leadership evolving beyond its original internal team, showing how the franchise continues to grow through collaboration. In regions like Alola and Paldea, the champion system feels less like an eternal title held by a single person and more like a competitive ranking, similar to real-world sports leagues. Instead of being the one chosen champion forever, players become part of an ongoing competitive tradition where champions can emerge, retire, or be replaced. This approach makes the Pokemon world feel dynamic, alive with shifting records, rivalries, and careers rather than one fixed hierarchy. Regional forms such as Alolan Raichu or Galarian Ponyta draw inspiration from real biological principles, especially island evolution. In isolated environments, with unique climates, available food sources, and few predators, species adapt dramatically over generations. Pokemon's regional variants mirror that concept in a playful, stylized way, suggesting evolutionary divergence across time and distance. It adds a quiet, scientific elegance to the series, connecting fiction with real-world ecology. Vivillon remains one of the only Pokemon whose appearance directly reflects real-world geography in its original implementation. Its wing pattern depended not on an in-game variable tied to a fictional region, but on the actual location data of the player's device. Because of this, completing a true Vivillon collection required international cooperation, trading between players across continents. It transformed a digital collecting task into a global social experience. Early generations treated TMs as single-use items, meaning players had to choose carefully when to teach a move like Earthquake or Thunderbolt. When Pokémon Black and White made TMs reusable, it fundamentally changed how players customized their teams. Instead of saving strong moves out of fear, players could experiment more freely, opening the door to creativity, strategy, and personalization. Developers have mentioned that hardware limitations, such as cartridge memory, often inspired creative solutions. Mew's existence is a perfect example. Leftover space allowed a hidden Pokémon to be added simply because there was room. Instead of obstacles, limitations became catalysts for invention. Even in modern releases, data miners continue finding unused moves, abandoned maps, placeholder trainers, and half-implemented mechanics buried in the files. These remnants act like archaeological artifacts, quiet reminders that game development is iterative, experimental, and full of paths not taken. Ultra Beasts, Paradox Pokémon, and other unique categories often follow mathematical patterns in their stats, using primes, mirrored spreads, or symbolic numbers. Whether a secret joke or a world-building detail, it shows that sometimes design hides playful logic beneath the surface. Across all of this, from unused boss fights and lost prototype Pokémon to strange cries and mathematical stat patterns, Pokémon quietly rewards curiosity. The deeper you look, the more you find. And somewhere in those small discoveries, those nearly forgotten details, the magic of Pokémon becomes quiet, familiar, and cozy, the perfect kind of mystery to drift off to. And just like that, we've reached the end of our quiet little journey through obscure Pokémon trivia. If you're still awake, thank you for spending this time here, and if you drifted off somewhere along the way, then the mission was successful. Pokémon is a franchise built on imagination, tiny hidden mysteries, and details tucked away where only the curious will notice. And sometimes, the most comforting thing about it isn't the battles or the story, but the feeling of discovery, the kind many of us first felt as kids staring at a Game Boy screen in the dark. If you'd like more videos like this, soft trivia, cozy lore, and slow-paced exploration, feel free to subscribe. No pressure. But statistically, people who don't subscribe pull nothing but Bidoof from every future booster pack. It's science, probably. Whether you're here to sleep, study, relax, or just enjoy the calm, I hope this left you a little more peaceful than when you arrived. Thanks for watching. Good night and sweet dreams of shinies, legendaries, and at least one perfect IV roll.